G'day, it's Rowan from Ferguson Brothers Rail. Today we're going to have a look at my floating benchwork approach, which is a bit of a hybrid between modular and permanent, although it's more on the permanent side. There are some pros and cons to the way I've done this, and I was hoping you might be able to take some of these ideas and apply them to your own designs. Let's take a look. Recently I published a video on converting this tin shed into a model layout room. I did describe in that video that we wanted a fairly high layout. This is to add more realism so you don't have to crouch down as low to view the layout, and it also makes it easier to get underneath it. But with more height comes more instability if you're just building off a standard table style benchwork approach. So that was the first reason we wanted to put this thing into the wall. And for reference, this is 1180 millimeters off the ground. Having no legs means it's easy to vacuum and clean around. The carpet squares can be replaced if necessary. It's easy to get underneath, so you've got full access for electronics. You can stand up close to it. And the structural pine is a lot cheaper than using dressed pine and building out all the legs. Before we jump underneath and take a closer look, I just want to mention the main advantage with this approach is the strength. This thing is rock solid, doesn't move at all. It's as strong as any workbench you'd build in your shop. That's probably what I like the most about it. It'll take any weight and nothing's going to wobble around like a modular layout. Now the swinging gate that I built in the previous video is, we've tested it for several months now. We're moving into the warmer months here in Australia. And so far, it hasn't moved at all. It's still rock solid in the same position. So fingers crossed, it'll remain that way, and we'll be able to safely lay some track. The way the plates are fixed to the wall are just 90 by 35mm structural pine, and they take most of the weight. And then the rest of the frame is basically the same material, braced across for extra strength. And you can see in the corners here, I've spanned a 45-degree piece across the two corners. That gives me a bit more depth in the corner where the layout's deeper. When I'm installing these 45-degree braces, I fix it at the top first, and then I get a spirit level on the top of the layout and push it up to make sure it's level. And I fix one screw in here to hold it, and then I go and check it again, make sure it's level. If everything's good, I'll go and add another 3 screws in this bottom piece as well. And this piece of timber in the back here, just a bit of yellow tongue flooring, that's screwed into the stud directly. So that's got 3 screws, the 75mm screws, they're very strong. And basically this thing's not going anywhere. You can see I've only got 2 on this far wall. This wall's 3.6 meters long. And I only need 2 of these braces because most of the weight, as I said, is on that rear plate, which is fixed really solidly into the studs. You can see up here, for example, there's 2 screws going into the stud there, and I've put in 2 screws basically wherever there's a stud. So each of these whaling plates has probably about 8 or so screws going into the stud work. You do have to be really careful that you don't have any bracing where there's going to be a turnout. So you've got a nice clear space for your switch motors. We've had a 1-to-1 scale map printed out, and we've actually glued it down to the top board, the 9mm ply. And that does a couple of things. It helps really test the concept of the layout design. And also means we can add various sections of the track, and then we've got a map for the future where the next installments are going to go. The reason I mention this being semi-modular is that all the more elaborate, expensive pieces, or more time-consuming pieces, like this scene here is our viaduct scene. It's going to have a bridge going across where this is. Now, this obviously is going to take us many hours to build, and we want to be able to take this with us if we ever move house. So everything will be screwed in from underneath. And really, all it'll be is a case of just chopping the track, and then the whole thing will just unplug and lift out. Now, it's a bit sad to say this, but the truth is none of us are going to be here forever. And at some point, somebody's going to want to repurpose this room into something else. Now, we don't plan on moving out here for a long time, but all these boards that are screwed into the walls, just unscrew, everything comes out, patch the holes, repaint, and then this room is clear for the next purpose. Let's hope that doesn't happen for a long time though. So while we've got our lovely zero legs layout room here, there's usually an exception to the rule, and there's one right here. This helix is quite a large radius, and it just extends out too far from the wall to brace off the side of the wall. So this is one case where I'll have a couple of legs coming off that down onto the carpet. Now while we're talking about that, I might go over a couple of the disadvantages with taking this approach to a layout room. The main disadvantage with this approach is that you can never go too deep off the wall. This is nice and strong based on how close it is to the wall, and the bracing doesn't need to extend out too far. This is about as deep as it gets on our layout, and from corner to outside, just over 1100. But you'll see here I've got this 45-degree brace heading across here, which gives this thing plenty of strength. So you can get away with a bit deeper in the corners. But I'd say off the walls, you probably wouldn't want to go much deeper than 500, 600 before it'd start, potentially losing a bit of stability. The other downside, of course, is you can't flip this upside down and get to your wiring. And I guess you could plan ahead and install these your plywood on top after your framing. I found that this plywood started to warp a bit when it was sitting around though, so unless you've got your pieces all ready to go, I found it easier just to screw everything down, get everything nice and level, glue down the layout plan, and then worry about the underside later. We've got plenty of height so we can get underneath it, but it means I'll probably have to use things like suitcase connectors instead of doing soldered joins off the bus. If you want to move this thing around on a frequent basis, then obviously you're not going to do this. This is something you pretty much set in place, and you're not going to be moving it around too often. Listen, I hope you got something out of this video, and let me know in the comments if it added any ideas for your own plans for your layout room. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see how this progresses. We're about to start laying down some track, and I'll probably do some videos in the coming months around wiring and turnouts, and I've got a few ideas for jigs that I can build to make laying track easier, and also I'm building a jig at the moment for modifying points, so I might do a video on that too. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.